Instead, we have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves in each other.
I'm Diane Lenning. I'm a retired educator from over 30 years. I taught in Orange County and some in LA County, as well as the California Youth Authority. And I'm currently running for State Superintendent of Public Instruction.
If you had to boil it down to one value, what's the most important to you?
Truth, integrity, honesty, sticking to your beliefs that you have researched and believe are what is best for yourself in life. And I can remember 5th or 6th grade, we learned that we were taught by a teacher that sometimes truth is really difficult for other people to hear or to accept, and that sometimes it may be good to couch it with softening mechanisms before and after. Or she taught us about little white lies in communicating with our friends at school, like, does that dress look good on you? If it looks horrible, should you really tell them? Or, you know, would a friend kind of be real nice about it and say, well, I do like another color on you better, but it's okay. You know, kind of different ways you can consider the other person, be truthful, but not hurt people's feelings.
I'm exploring what empathy means to people. What does it mean to you?
Well, what comes to my mind is that famous idiom about walking in someone else's shoes. I think many people would think of that. And I think it's easy to understand in a phrase that you really don't know what it's like about some things in life until you've experienced it like that other person has experienced it. And that is so true about so many things. I had a period of time in my 30s when I was ill for a number of years. And until that, I never really knew what it was like to be a sick person. But now I'm totally well, and I have no signs of that anymore. But sometimes people are really mean to people when they're sick. I was treated worse than I've ever been treated in my life those years I was sick. Like, people would be real upset if I didn't open the door for them at a shopping center when I couldn't open it. But I looked okay. You know, they had misconceptions about why I didn't open that door for them. And so it's really important that we look to the possibility of reasons as to why people's actions are what we observe. And we need to give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they're not feeling good today, or there's something going in their life that they just can't reach out today. I think that's a part of empathy, is trying to understand the other person's viewpoint and the other person's feelings and where they're coming from. And many of us now are raised different than each other. When I grew up, we were raised very similarly in a small town of 10,000 people. We all went to the same school, had the same handwriting teacher, went to the same school my mother went to, and all my aunts and uncles. So we all were raised in a very similar way. We understood each other without saying it. But then as Orange County became larger and it has really increased in population, we've had very many different kinds of people come in with different backgrounds. And I had to learn a little older in life what empathy was, because you really have to understand the other person.
You said you learned about empathy, what empathy was. What happened? Do you remember any story of something where you learned a lesson about empathy?
Well, what comes to my mind, there could be many things I could mention, but the first thing that comes to my mind is a woman that attended our church who had a goiter. It was right here under her neck and very large. And I'd never seen one in my life and haven't since. But that's about when we found out how important it was to have iodine and salt. And they explained to us kids that she hadn't had enough iodine in her diet, and that was how come she had that. And in those days, they didn't do surgery as much as they do now. So I learned to feel empathy for her, because she was still a very nice person regardless of this odd-looking thing under her neck. Everything else about her was what everyone else looked like. And that really helped me to see empathy physically, when you see somebody who's physically handicapped. But you know, sometimes people are emotionally handicapped from their raising, and you don't see it by a physical, visible disability. So much of it is just in relationships and relating to other people. What I've had to teach some of my students was to have eye contact with one another. Because when you have eye contact, it really means that you're trying to have a sincere effort to communicate with someone else and find out who they are inside. I've often told my students, you know, your beauty comes from inside you, not really what we look like outside. When you're a beautiful person inside, that's what really matters.
Well, it sounds like empathy is very important to you then.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. I think it's a very important characteristic that we all need.
Sometimes I like to look at the theme a little bit differently. If you created a metaphor for empathy, like the typical metaphor is empathy is looking through someone else's eyes, standing in someone else's shoes. If you create a metaphor off the top of your head for what empathy is like to you, what metaphor would you make for it?
Oh, feeling the heartbeat of another, perhaps. What is the life essence of that person? How do they feel about issues and important things in life? What is important to them? But you chose the other ones we're all used to hearing, which are all very good. And I had never been asked this before. That just was the top of my head.
Yeah, it's a little creativity. Just
yeah.
To kind of do you have a metaphor for truth, which is the value you were saying, which is the first one you mentioned? What is truth like?
I like to think of it as a shining light. So what comes to my mind is the torch that the Lady Statue of Liberty holds in New York Harbor. I kind of always felt she stands for truth as well as freedom and liberty.
The problems with empathy, what do you have to watch out for?
Well, some people learn through life to use these tools they know bring empathy from others to get things, and maybe sometimes to manipulate. Like I've had students who've tried to do certain actions with me as a teacher in order to get out of work, their homework or whatever, or to maybe run to the bathroom too often and then go around and say hi to their friend in the other room. And they have some kind of reason that they've cooked up that has worked in the past to gain empathy from the adult. So we have to be sure to look out for the genuineness of the person who is using that, not to misuse our trust in our empathy, our feelings of empathy for another. I think that's basically somewhat innocent, but it can escalate into something more serious if you're not careful about that.